Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. In Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenian authorities say 17 more soldiers have been killed in fighting with the Azerbaijan over the disputed region. They said the latest killings have pushed the military death toll to 542 since the war started on 27th of September. Meanwhile, Russia called on Armenia and Azerbaijan to adhere to the agreed ceasefire. China has urged the Southeast Asian countries to remain vigilant over the risk of US-stalking geopolitical competition. Foreign Minister Wang Yi said this in a joint press conference with his Malaysian counterpart Ishmamuddin Hussain. Wang Yi said the ASEAN members should work together to remove external disruption in the South China Sea. The contact groups of the Afghan government and Taliban have resumed talks in the Qatari capital, Doha. Taliban spokesperson Mohammed Naeem said the two sides discussed all contentious issues in detail. Naeem said they also agreed to continue meetings to reach a resolution. India has once again reported the world's highest 706 COVID-19 deaths and over 55,000 infections overnight. Meanwhile, a White House physician said US President Donald Trump has tested negative for COVID-19. In Pakistan, 8 people have died from the virus overnight, taking the toll to 6,588. While globally, the virus has claimed over 1,079,000 lives and infected over 37.7 million people. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We'll start from the Nagorno-Karabakh region, where Armenian authorities say 17 more soldiers have been killed in fighting with Azerbaijan over the disputed region. They said the latest killings have pushed the military death toll to 542 since the war started on September 27. Earlier, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called on Armenia and Azerbaijan to adhere to the agreed ceasefire. Meeting with his Armenian counterpart, Lavrov said he hopes both sides strictly abide by the pledge. The United Nations also expressed disappointment over the ceasefire violations. Spokesperson for the UN Secretary General said all sides must act under international humanitarian law to protect the civilians. Meanwhile, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan urged the European Union to take a consistent stance on Azerbaijan's territorial integrity. In a phone call with the EU Council head, Erdogan said Armenia endangered Europe's energy supplies by attacking Ganja city. Now, the contact groups of the Afghan government and the Taliban have resumed talks in the Qatari capital of Doha. Taliban spokesperson Mohammed Naeem said the two sides discussed all contentious issues in detail. Naeem said they also agreed to continue meetings to reach a resolution. The two sides are trying to reach a consensus regarding ground rules of engagement in the core intra-Afghan dialogue. The dialogue hit a snag after Kabul refused to acknowledge the Doha Pact as the base document for dialogue. Meanwhile, anti-India clashes have erupted in Srinagar after the Indian occupying forces martyred 2 more civilians. 2 civilians were martyred in an extrajudicial operation by Indian police and paramilitary forces. Locals say Indian troops set a house of a Kashmiri family on fire during the operation. Following the martyrdom, scores of people came out protesting. They chanted anti-India slogans and clashed with the occupying forces. The Indian troops fired tear gas and shot pellets to disperse the protesters, injuring many. Now, Pakistan's President Arif Alvi says India is hatching conspiracies to create religious disharmony in the country. In an interview, Alvi urged the nation to be united in dealing with new challenges like hybrid war. Alvi said India wants to destabilize Pakistan through religious fragmentation. The president said political forces in Pakistan should stop maligning the state institutions and stand behind them. He said besides creating problems in Balochistan through its spies like Kulbhushan Yadav, India is also trying to create unrest in Karachi. Alvi also said Delhi is playing the role of a spoiler in Afghanistan peace process. He said India has problems with all of its neighbors, including China, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh and Nepal. Now, Islamabad has rejected a statement by Indian Defence Minister that China and Pakistan are deliberately creating border disputes. The Foreign Office said India not only creates disputes with neighbors but also runs away from a peaceful resolution. It said India is using terrorism as a tool to advance its extremist agenda in the region. The Foreign Office said the statement is another example of New Delhi's obsession with Islamabad. It also slammed malicious Indian propaganda against the close Pakistan-China friendship. Moving on, a Palestinian man on a hunger strike in Israeli prison for nearly 80 days is on the verge of death. Israeli rights group B'Tselem said Maher al-Akhraz has been in administrative detention since his arrest in late July. It said the policy is used by Israeli occupation forces to hold suspects without legally charging them. Akhraz launched his hunger strike to protest the policy of forceful detentions. Now, China has urged the Southeast Asian countries to remain vigilant over the risk of U.S. stalking geopolitical competition. Foreign Minister Wang Yi said this in a joint press conference with his Malaysian counterpart Hishmamuddin Hussain. Wang Yi said the ASEAN members should work together to remove external disruption in the South China Sea. He said Beijing and Kuala Lumpur have agreed to further cooperation against the COVID-19 pandemic. Malaysia's foreign minister said disputes over the South China Sea should be resolved through regional dialogue. China's top diplomat is in Malaysia during his five-nation tour of Southeast Asia. Now, in the U.S. presidential election, early in-person voting has started in the state of Georgia with high turnout. U.S. Elections Project said voters can cast over 10 million votes for the November 3rd polls, outpacing the early vote in 2016. Surge in early voting caused problems in electronic poll books used in check-in voters, leading to 10 hours wait. Georgia has long been a Republican stronghold, but recent demographic changes have made it a more competitive state. Meanwhile, Jordan's King Abdullah has sworn in a new government led by veteran diplomat Bashir al-Khaswani. The king has directed him to accelerate the IMF-backed reforms as the economy faces its sharpest contraction in decades due to COVID-19. British-educated Khawase has replaced Omar al-Razzaz, who resigned last week. In a letter accepting his resignation, the king said mistakes were made in the handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Last month, the monarch dissolved the parliament at the end of its four-year term. Under constitutional rules, the government must resign within a week. Now, Malaysia's opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim has met the nation's king to prove his parliamentary support for premiership. Ibrahim declared he had secured a strong majority from federal politicians to replace Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin. Police said they had opened a probe into Anwar Ibrahim's claim of a majority after a list of his alleged backers spread on social media. King Sultan Abdullah plays a largely ceremonial role, but he has power to dissolve parliament on the premier's advice. No political party has clearly declared support for Ibrahim so far. The struggle for power coincides with Malaysia's grappling economy and the resurgence of COVID-19. Meanwhile, Germany says it is interested in maintaining good relations with Russia despite the Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny's poisoning issue. In an interview, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said bilateral relations between both nations have suffered from a number of incidents. But he said Berlin has made great efforts over recent years to foster dialogue with Russia. Germany and France are pushing for sanctions against Russian individuals using nerve-poisoning agent. Russia has already rejected the accusations and asked Berlin to present evidence. And the global death toll from COVID-19 has topped 1,078,000, with over 37.7 million people infected. In India, the number of fatalities has crossed 109,000 and more than 7.1 million people have contracted the virus so far. More details in this report.
Is faring the worst as flu season approaches amid a raging second wave of COVID-19. The World Health Organization has sounded alarm with Europe and the Americas reporting a record number of cases for the last 4 days. The US continues to lead the numbers with more than 31 states, reporting a surge in new infections. On his return rally in Florida, US President Donald Trump continued his narrative against restrictions mocking quarantine measures.
I went through it. Now they say I'm immune. I feel so powerful. But there is something nice. I don't have to be locked up in my basement, and I wouldn't allow that to happen anyway. I wouldn't allow it to happen.
In Europe, after France and Spain, daily cases are also jumping in Germany. Austrian Premier Scott Morrison says the resurgence in France and Spain shows how fast all gains can be wiped by a second wave. As COVID-19 infections continue to surge in the UK, Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced new restrictions. But the country's top medic says the measures are not enough.
I am not confident, and nor is anybody confident, that the Tier 3 proposals for the highest rates, if we did the absolute base case and nothing more, would be enough to get on top of it. And that is why there's a lot of flexibility in the Tier 3 level for local authorities, guided by the directors of public health, who are absolutely superb around the country.
In Russia, COVID-19 hospitalizations in the capital, Moscow, have been steadily rising over the past week. Meanwhile, China's biggest air show, the International Aviation and Aerospace Exhibition, has also been postponed because of the pandemic. In South Korea, daily cases are back in triple digits as the country struggles to cap new clusters.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 8 people have lost their lives to COVID-19 in the last 24 hours, with the death toll rising to 6,588. The Health Ministry says 530 people tested positive overnight. The ministry added there are 8,651 active coronavirus cases in the country. It said out of over 319,000 infections, more than 304,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 140,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported more than 100,000 cases. In the capital, Islamabad, close to 17,500 have been infected so far. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now, 1 person has died and 12 others have been injured after a glass roof collapsed in Australia's Curtin University. Emergency services say roof of an under-construction building caved in near Curtin's medical school. In a statement, the university said no students or staff were among the victims. Authorities said the cause of the accident will be investigated by a work safety regulator. The university has urged people to avoid the area. Also, at least 11 people have been killed by severe flash floods in western Cambodia. Local media said authorities have evacuated 2,400 families in the Persat province. It said heavy rainfall for the past several days caused disaster in the province. Local media said 75,000 hectares of land have been flooded. The military and police have been deployed in several areas to assist in the evacuations. Now, in India's capital, New Delhi, air quality has hit the very poor level for the first time this season. The Met Department says in the last 24 hours, the average air quality index was recorded at its worst since February. Smog is a year-round problem in India capital, causing respiratory issues, irritable eyes and skin infections in residents. New Delhi witnessed a bright blue sky after years due to a fall in emissions during the COVID-19 lockdown. But resumption of public transport, burning of farm residues and cooler temperatures have blurred the sky again.
The atmosphere has completely changed as compared to lockdown. We should decrease the use of machinery and promote public transportation. It is aggravating breathing problems, and there's already a coronavirus pandemic. So problem with breathing is already there for the people these days, and pollution will only help to worsen it.
Well, the Met Department said pollution levels will rise further if concrete steps are not taken. Now, the UN has urged development banks to stop backing fossil fuel projects. This comes after a report found that the World Bank invested $12 billion in the sector since the 2015 Paris Agreement. In a video message, UN Chief Antonio Guterres asked countries to ensure development banks boost renewable energy. He said the world needs speed, scale and decisive leadership at the moment. Meanwhile, the World Bank said the report gave a distorted and unsubstantiated view. It said the bank had committed nearly $9.4 billion to finance renewable energy in developing countries from 2015 to 19. Now, the world is observing International Disaster Risk and Reduction Day. The United Nations has called for better planning to mitigate the effects of natural disasters. UN Chief Antonio Guterres says a safer, more resilient world must be built by acting on science and evidence. He said political commitments are required at the highest levels to follow Sendai framework for disaster risk and reduction plans. Guterres added, COVID-19 has shown that systemic risks require international cooperation.
Many countries are facing multiple crises simultaneously. We will see more of these. Extreme weather events have risen dramatically over the past 2 decades. Yet we have seen little progress on reducing climate disruption and environmental degradation. Bad situations only get worse without good disaster risk governance. Disaster risk isn't the sole responsibility of local and national authorities. COVID-19 has shown us that systemic risk requires international cooperation.
Well, the International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction was started in 1989 after a call by the UN General Assembly. Now, the researchers returning from the largest ever Arctic expedition have warned that polar ice is melting faster than ever. More about the expedition in this report.
The polar stern icebreaker returned to the port of Bremerhaven in Germany after more than a year drifting in Arctic ice. This was the most ambitious Arctic research expedition ever undertaken. A total of 442 researchers, crew members, teachers and journalists hailing from 37 countries were involved in the 5 stages of the expedition. Over the course of a year, they examined changes in the atmosphere, ice and ocean and their impact on the climate system in the Arctic.
Researchers have gathered an unprecedented trove of data, which will be useful for generations to come. This data gathered in the Arctic, the epicenter of climate change, will help to close significant holes in our data from this region. It will allow us to make climate models more precise and re-evaluate them.
Researchers faced challenges including mountains of ice appearing suddenly due to changes in pressure. They also encountered the danger posed by polar bears and the toll of working for months on end in complete darkness during the Arctic winter. Discussing the findings, leader Marcus Rex said the effects of climate change are more than evident in the region. He warned that the Arctic can be ice-free in summer within a few decades if humanity does not change course.
This world is threatened. The ice is dying. If we keep going as we are, then the Arctic will be ice-free in summer within a few decades, and the world I just described will no longer exist. In winter, we almost continuously measure temperatures 10 degrees higher than those measured by Fridtjof Nansen on his expedition.
The research reveals that the world needs to work for climate and reduce greenhouse gases more than ever to protect the Earth.
Now, China has unveiled its plan to turn Shenzhen city, the high-tech hub, into a core engine of reform. Executive Vice President of the China Development Institute, Guo Wanda, says Shenzhen has good foundation to trial reforms. Beijing hopes Shenzhen's transformation will power growth and innovation in the Greater Bay Area. This comes just before President Xi Jinping's visit to the city, marking 40 years since it was set up as a special economic zone. The 5-year plan gives Shenzhen more autonomy in areas such as land use, tech, hiring foreign professionals. Now, an extremely rare, vivid purple-pink diamond mined in Russia is expected to fetch up to $38 million. The gem is being shown in Hong Kong, Singapore and Taipei before being auctioned by Sotheby's in Geneva on November 11. The oval gem, which is named after a Russian ballet, the Spirit of the Rose, is the largest of its kind to be offered at the auction. The auction house says the 14.83 carat diamond was cut from the largest pink crystal ever found in Russia. Naturally, colored diamonds occur because they possess a particular lattice structure that refracts light. Pink diamonds are both rare and aesthetically highly prized by collectors. Now, Peru has opened the ruins of Machu Picchu for a single Japanese tourist who waited almost 7 months to visit the site. He was trapped in the Andean country during the COVID-19 outbreak. Jesse Takayama was due to visit Machu Picchu in March, but it closed because of coronavirus. His original plan had been to spend only a few days in Peru to visit the Inca citadel. Cultural Minister Ajerando Nero said the Takayama was granted access after submitting a special request. He said the ruins will be reopened for national and foreign tourists in November. The site will permit 30% of its normal capacity of 675 people per day. Now, discarded fabric swatches are normally either burned or thrown away as waste. But these colorful pieces have found a second life as valuable art in the hands of a Nigerian artist. How exactly does the artist create portraits using fabric waste? This report has the answers.
Lagos-based Marcelina Akpogitor has perfected the art of recycling discarded pieces of Ankara fabric and turning it into something meaningful. Akpogitor's work effectively combines art and fashion on canvas, complemented with acrylic paint. She says the meaning of the cloth has helped fuel her work.
The fabric makes my work unique because it's an identifier. When you see it, it pulls you in. You have there's a common ground between you and the work because it's fabric. It's something that you're familiar with.
Nigeria's economy runs on crude oil, but its fashion, art and film industries garner it global recognition and feed national pride. According to London auction house Bonhams, the prices for African artwork have risen by 70 to 100% in the past 10 years.
Art materials are quite expensive. If you don't have some money, you can't get some certain materials. But these fabric were just lying around me, so I started using them to create jewelries. From there, I was also doing drawing. From there, I just questioned myself that I could push what I was doing further. So I started using the Ankara to make faces.
Akpogitor's work have sold for as much as $25,000. Lagos Raleigh Gallery found the artist on social media and was quick to feature her pieces. By now, she has sold over 100 art pieces to the gallery and hopes to explore other art mediums in coming years.
Now, in Rome, some of the finest sculptures from antiquity have been put on display. Busts of Roman emperors and an ancient Greek relief carved 25,000 years ago are just some of the 92 pieces. More details in this report.
The newly restored exhibition space in Rome's Capitoline Museums will show the antiques in a blockbuster show, the Torlonia marbles. The marbles belong to the aristocratic Torlonia family and represent a fraction of the 620 sculptures in their possession. Like many leading families, the Torlonias put their huge collection on display in the museum, but after 101 years, they locked its doors in 1976.
The Torlonia Museum was one of the most important museums in Rome for quite a long time, from 1875 through World War II. And then it disappeared in some way. This is an opportunity to see a number of works that are extremely important, that everybody knows from books, but nobody has seen.
Many of the works have undergone substantial restoration over the years, including a statue of a goat whose body dates back to the 1st century AD. Among the pieces on view is a fountain basin carved in ancient Greece that was believed to have stood in the garden of Julius Caesar.
We have chosen these pieces because they lend themselves to narrate not just the pieces themselves, but the formation of the Torlonia Museum as a collection of collections.
Torlonia marbles will remain in display in Rome until June next year. They will be shown in at least one other European country and as well as the US before returning to Italy.
Now, European stocks are retreating with investors watching the latest China data and coronavirus developments. The pan-European stock 600 has dipped under the flat line. London's FTSE and Frankfurt's DAX have shed marginally. The CAC 40 in Paris and Italy's FTSE MIB have slipped close to 0.5%. Earlier, Asian markets traded mixed, with Australian and Japanese stocks gaining, while South Korean bourses dipped. Trading in Hong Kong was suspended due to Typhoon Nanka. And now let's have a look at the weather updates. Well, that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Take care.